Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon and good morning, wherever you are. Um, so I would like to welcome everyone to this session on global entrepreneurship by Pakistanis, global enterprises that Pakistanis have built. And I would like to start with some good news. The last quarter at LUMS running has been extremely eventful, not just because of the COVID, but LUMS received two very exciting multi-million-dollar grants for furthering its academic mission. LUMS boasts itself to be the premier elite university of Pakistan, catering all sorts of students with a diverse background. The first of the grant was a scholarship endowment fund for smart and needy students. And the other grant, also another featured looking grant, was to establish an academic program in blockchain technology and research. We are excited to have both the donors on the panel today. And this is a very focused kind of a panel. We have Mudassir Sheikha and Muneeb Ali. Mudassir built Careem from scratch, we will hear the story in some more detail, but Careem's name in Pakistan and many countries of the world is no strange to anyone. Similarly, Muneeb is a LUMS alumni, although Mudassir can be categorized as a LUMS alumni because he spent a few months here. Muneeb spent the entire 4 years plus some more at LUMS, and he then joined Princeton University, graduated from there, and started this initiative in blockchain technology. We will hear from both of them. So we are very excited to have both of you. Thank you very much, and of course, thank you for the team which has managed this thing together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by a brief story about the Careem story and the Hiro or Blockstack story. So I would like to start with Mudassir. Mudassir, please share with us how the idea came about, what inspired you to do it, and how it started, how it progressed, what happened. Please share the Careem story with us.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Zartash. Nice to meet you, Muneeb. Thanks for having me on the panel. And the Careem story didn't really start with an idea, didn't really start with a problem. It started with a desire to build something big and build something meaningful. So Careem started in 2012, but a year before Careem started in 2011, two things that happened that really triggered that desire to build something big and meaningful. The first was my co-founder, my partner in crime, Magnus Olsson, a Swedish gentleman, was working with me in the consulting firm that we were working together. And in 2011, he basically had a bleeding in his brain. And he was basically told that there is a 15% chance that he will not survive. So as you can imagine, a 30-year-old guy going through that life-ending experience, life becomes very clear when you're confronted with that reality. And he sort of promised himself that if he survives, he will call himself Magnus 2.0 and build something big and meaningful that will be his legacy on this planet. In my case, it was much less dramatic, at least much less life-altering. I was on a project for the consulting firm in Pakistan, and the objective was to figure out a healthy list of clients that we could serve in Pakistan. And the consulting firms in Pakistan, global consulting firms, generally they serve large clients. So I went to the Karachi Stock Exchange website, made a list of all the big companies in Pakistan. And this is 2011. And you'd expect there to be a lot of companies that are worth a lot, billions of dollars, you would think. It's a big country, large market, 200 million people. But to my surprise, to my shocking surprise, and a bit embarrassing surprise as well, there was only one company at that time in 2011 that was worth more than $1 billion. And forget about the $1 billion, like it's just a number marker. But the fact is, a big country like Pakistan had only produced one large company. And I would often joke with Magnus, hey, you are from Sweden. I don't know what you guys eat for breakfast, that you've produced multiple very large and lasting organizations. they built Volvo, Ericsson, Stripe, there's not Spotify, Skype, and the list goes on. Whereas in this 200 million people large country, we have not produced more than one large enterprise. So it was really those two incidents came together, and the desire was to build something big and build something meaningful. And then we said, let's find a problem to solve. We looked in our past as consultants, we had run into a lot of problems in the Middle East. Transportation was something that was a daily struggle for us. And we sized the problem, it was big enough. We thought it was meaningful because it would help us create a lot of jobs, people that would work on this platform. So we said, it has all the markings to become big and meaningful, so let's start. So that's really how it happened.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We will talk more about how the business built and expanded into multiple countries later in the conversation. I would at this point like to ask Muneeb how the story started. I know that you transitioned from being a PhD student at Princeton, and I think the later part of your PhD, you transitioned going from pure networking, routing kind of a background and moving into the block stack and blockchain technology. So how did that happen? What motivated you? What was the initial elements there?
Absolutely. So I think, as you would remember, I was always drawn to computer science research, and even within computer science, like more towards computer networking. I actually remember taking the course at LUMS, in which the book we used for computer networking was by Larry Peterson. And I ended up working with Larry Peterson at Princeton later on. Obviously, that felt like a dream come true, that you're passionate about the field, you want to do research work there, and you're getting to work with the people that you have idolized over the years. And I think for me, it was a little bit like academia, especially in my field, because it's very very kind of like commercial, and you're building like cloud computing or real systems. It started feeling like academia has somewhat of a disadvantage when you compare it to the industry. Like imagine Google or Facebook, if they're doing research work in data centers, they have much larger budgets, they have real traffic, real data, and they can actually be on the bleeding edge of technology. Versus even a university like Princeton that has funding, but you can't really match that. So interestingly, like I was always interested in next generation internet protocols and how to kind of like improve these things. And instead of going the route of being a faculty member somewhere, I met my co-founder at Princeton, and we basically went to venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, and with a very ambitious type of a proposal that why don't we fund a R&D lab through venture capital for doing some of this research, and maybe that could be faster. And interestingly, I think that story appeals to a lot of the really sophisticated investors, like the top funds, but not a lot of VCs would actually invest in that, right? So we're really grateful for the people who took that chance, so like the Union Square Ventures and Y Combinator, funds like that, who were effectively funding an open source project, which was like a moonshot and very low probability of potentially a very, very large success, right? And I think, so it has very strong, I would say, academic roots. Like initially, like we hired a lot of, like I was able to bring in a bunch of my colleagues from Princeton University to join the project, and we remained in R&D mode for a very long time. We discovered blockchains along the way as a very elegant solution to some of the problems we were trying to solve and trying to build this next generation internet. And then the crypto industry basically had legs of its own, right? It became a thing. Like Bitcoin now has $1 trillion in market cap, and our platform has kind of like evolved to effectively try to build the rest of the software stack, what developers would need to build smart contracts, decentralized applications on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. And so we were very grateful to basically have the front row seat to this entire crypto industry over the last 7 years. Like just as a frame of reference, when I started, Bitcoin was like $90 at that time, right? And there were a handful of people who would actually work in the industry, and obviously it has grown a lot since then.
Great, thank you, Muneeb. So I have had the opportunity to work with both Muneeb and Mudassir, over multiple years, in different points in time. And one thing that I can tell everyone right now is, both of them are extremely hardworking, passionate kind of people. But I would like to expand that on a little bit, um, and talk about your early careers. What were you like a high school student or an undergrad student? So I will start with Mudassir. Mudassir, कुछ उसके बारे में बताएं.
Sorry, I was on mute. So yeah, the easiest way to describe it is a word that used to be used called a nerd, and basically that's the description. I was very focused on studies, very focused on making sure that I get good grades, come towards the top of the class, and that was sort of the early targets and the aspirations that my parents were always going after. So if you weren't coming towards the top of the class, then something was wrong and you would have severe consequences. So it really brought a lot of focus on studies, both in school, then in college as well. And then that just became a habit, to work hard and just make that a primary focus. So yeah, nothing much, Zartash, other than just focus on studies. Now, along the way, you get lessons as well, right? You get humbling lessons. So that sort of define your character. So one of the ones that I had early on was after high school, I had decent grades, but literally could not get into any college with any scholarship that I could afford to go to college with. So that was quite a humbling experience. I felt I had good grades. I should be able to get into a good school with the right support. That didn't happen. Then we had one humbling experience together early on in life, where all of us at the height of the dot-com bubble, super passionately with sleeping bags at the office, were working crazy hard to achieve a decent outcome. That didn't happen. And I feel that those two were defining experiences, that look, you can do what you can do, but there are circumstances outside your control, and those other things need to sort of line up for you as well, for you to be successful. Whether you call it luck, you call it blessings, I don't know, but you need some of that to get the things going. And the only thing that you can do, I feel, to have them move in your favor is to make sure that you keep doing the right things. And if you do the right things, inshallah, good things, if not the first time, if not the second time, then the third time will happen. So yeah, just focused on studies and hope that the right things would happen at some point.
So before I let Mudassir, Muneeb answer, the same question. And Mudassir, I would like to have a follow-up question on this. Did you think about, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, look into the mirror and say, okay, yeah, I can make it really big? Because both of you, mashallah, have made it very big and build companies which people look up to. The aspiring entrepreneurs in Pakistan, there is a lot of talent here, and you guys have created examples for them. And we would like many more examples. Unfortunately, we don't have too many examples, but we are lucky to have both of you here. So was it very clear to you, or did you know that you will make it big, or you will make a big successful company, or what were the feelings?
Yeah, so I think two things, Zartash. One is the space at which it happened is definitely a surprising thing for all of us. Maybe this would have happened in twice as much time as frankly we expected. So I think that's a surprising thing. But there was a lot of confidence that we have what it takes to build a large and lasting institution that's going to make a positive impact at scale. So that confidence was there, that belief was there. And there's a very interesting quote from Steve Jobs from early on, in which he basically says, if you look at people who have built large companies or have achieved tremendously well, and if you speak to them, you realize that they're pretty ordinary people. They're like you and I. There's nothing special about them. And if they can do it, I can do it as well. And a lot of times the difference in their ability to do it versus our ability to do it is the fact that they take on some risks, right? They have the confidence and they basically say, look, I'm going to make a run for this. And that becomes a defining thing, that they take it and you don't take it. And a lot of other times, especially in our part of the world, the ambition level is missing, right? And sometimes we even take the risk, but we take the risk with the ambition level of building something provincial, building something national versus think global. And again, there was a very interesting story I heard from an interesting podcast. And this guy was trying to figure out which part of the world will become the next Silicon Valley. And he goes to Tel Aviv in Israel. And usse puchta hai ki, yaar, do you think you guys will become the next Silicon Valley? And the guy in Tel Aviv took it personally and said, what do you mean, Silicon Valley? We've done phenomenally well on most metrics. The innovation, the entrepreneurial activity that comes out of Tel Aviv is world class. And he says there's everything that Silicon Valley has, we have in Tel Aviv. But there's one thing that we have that Silicon Valley does not have. And guess what that thing is? Any guesses? What does Tel Aviv, Israel has that Silicon Valley does not have? वो कहता है कि यार in Tel Aviv, every kid has a Jewish mother who's constantly telling their kid that for all the sacrifices we do, for all the hard work that we do to bring you up, you're telling us that you cannot win the Nobel Prize for us? यार हमारी अम्माएं तुम्हें कहती थी क्लास में फर्स्ट आ जाना, यहाँ की अम्माएं कह रही हैं कि यार win the freaking Nobel Prize, right? Be the best in the world in what you do, which is no surprising, right? Every year when you look at the list of Nobel laureates, you realize that, man, there's so many people from the Jewish community. And I'm sure that is happening at some scale. Otherwise, that would not happen. So I think थोड़ा तो risk taking की कमी है, और दूसरा ambition level. Sometimes I think we sort of shortchange our own potential.
Very well said. And perseverance. You need to have the drive to keep going. And Muneeb, working with you for a long period of time, I know that from early on. When you were a kid, I know you from those days. So you had that drive. I think it was the time when LUMS had recently started the research culture and research program, and Muneeb would go and dig out all the papers from these professors at MIT. I still remember the Cord paper, from MIT that you dug out, and you said, I want to build something on top of this. So I think, and you stuck to that for the next few years. You just stuck to that, and that I think has contributed a lot towards building you, or towards shaping your personality. So tell us how you were, starting from high school and your LUMS experience, and then after that Princeton's experience. Please share.
Yes. So I think I can. Interestingly, I think my mother, she might actually be watching the stream right now. So I think I definitely had a similar experience, that very grades oriented upbringing. Like the most important thing was for all of us, me and my siblings, that you have to be like number one in class, and we would take it very seriously, right? Like we would be like stressed out right before the results are coming. And I think that stayed with me, interestingly, till around, I would say, 9th grade. And then I think I just took my own path. And it was a little bit actually disappointing for my parents, right? That I started doing other things. I started getting interested in other things. I started, they got me a computer, and I would like stay up all night working on the computer. And my parents were worried for me that what's going on with our kid. He has like red eyes all the time, and he's like sleeping at odd hours. And it was really like I was trying to find things that I was more passionate about, and I was kind of like drawn to certain things, and I started falling behind in grades a lot. So my journey even to LUMS wasn't that easy. I actually didn't apply anywhere else. Like my parents wanted me to apply to a lot of universities, like to go the straight kind of like path, and I was like trying to do like wacky things, and I barely made the minimum grade requirements for LUMS. Like I got in, but I barely cleared the minimum requirements. And again, at LUMS, I think my grades on the computer science side would be decent, like not not like an A+ in every course, but I think just naturally I knew about computer science. So it was relatively easy for me to get good grades on the computer science side. But I was not doing good on the other subjects at all, right? Like I was in trouble in courses. I was not maintaining a very good GPA, and again doing other things. Like as Zartash was mentioning, like I was trying to do research work. I was trying to build stuff, and that again got me into trouble because I couldn't get into good grad schools straight away, right? So my path was actually I worked with Dr. Zartash for a while, trying to beef up my research portfolio. Had a very non-traditional route too. I spent some time in Europe. Again, like there was that belief that I really deserved to be at a really good university, even if my grades kind of like say otherwise. And somehow I think it's that basically the drive of like not giving up, like, you know, that hey, I believe it, like, and I'll convince you, and I'll do whatever it takes, right? So I basically broke it down to, well, if at a top university, here are the conferences that you're going to publish, and that's kind of like your output, I can just do that outside of the top university, and then go to the university and be like, look, I'm qualified enough, like, you know, give me a shot. And similarly, I think, interestingly, like at Princeton, like I think I got decent grades. Like I had to really force myself. Like my heart wasn't in there, and that triggered me to actually almost like go on a self-learning path that just hasn't stopped. Like it's the time when you realize that you can learn anything you want in the world, right? And you don't need structures around it. You don't really need teachers even. Like everything is online, everything's public, and you can just like go on your own journey. And I started just learning about startups. Again, as I think we were chatting about earlier, what those were saying really resonates, that these people are not special, right? Like even for the internet, like we were working on, you know, potentially building a better internet. Internet was not designed by aliens. Like it was designed by humans, and those humans are around us. Like we have like Tim Berners-Lee, like David Clark, like Vint Cerf, like these are humans, and you can talk to them. You can talk to them about their thought process of like why they designed a certain protocol a certain way, or same with entrepreneurs who have been successful. I think once you start like breaking it down, that it's a skill set. You can learn it. You can learn to actually take calculated risks. Fundraising is a process. You can like get better at it over time. Hiring, running a successful company, it's not like there's a skill called running a successful company. It's a combination of like 100 different things, and the job keeps changing all the time. And you just learn, like my job pretty much changes every year or 2 years, right? What I was doing like 6 years ago, I'm not doing anymore, and I'm doing other things. So I think it's definitely like that. And on the element of luck, I think there's this quote that always stayed with me, and I think it's a very simple quote. It says, luck favors the prepared mind, right? So you cannot like get lucky, and maybe you would never get lucky. But what happens with this constant effort and kind of like being there and being present is that when a chance comes around and you have the prepared mind that is ready to receive that opportunity, you can then spot it, and you can really be like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that I make the most out of this opportunity, right? So luck favors the prepared mind. And I think some people might never get that shot, but if you get that shot, I think it would be, and this is what it feels like, right? Like, sure, we're very grateful for the growth we've seen so far, but our competitors in the market, like Ethereum is a $200 billion network, right? And maybe this is what you felt when you were competing against Uber or something like that, right? So we feel like small and tiny in many regards as well, and we are paranoid about not failing, and paranoid about like trying to make the most of the opportunity that we have today. And I think that's kind of like the summary of it.
Okay, great. Very well said that, you know, the luck will come your way, perhaps, but whenever it comes there, you have to have the, you know, the telescope to see it, to have the courage to pick it up. So I would like to talk about innovation. So whenever you were, you know, running a business, starting a business, I see that, you know, if I compare Careem with Blockstack, for example, I see a sort of a contrast. Both of them have become proven big businesses, but there is a contrast. Careem is probably more very heavy on operations, expertise in operations, and then supported by technology. On the other hand, the way that I see it is Blockstack is more technology and then fewer kind of operations. When building these businesses, I'm sure that there will be times when you see some roadblocks and you have to go around those. You have to innovate either in business or in technology. Um, any sort of unusual incidents that you might remember, any anecdote in which you have to apply an unusual sort of business practice or technology innovation or something like that, unusual use of technology or unusual use of a business practice. um, um, I will start with Mudassir. Mudassir, कोई आता है ज़हन में कोई ऐसा incident?
Yeah, in the business that we run, there are a lot of jugars that we've had to do, and we continue to bring them out. Just last week, and this is super fresh, we are having an issue on the food delivery side in Saudi, where this one really, really popular roasted chicken restaurant has opened in the Dammam, and they have one store in the Dammam, and that store is completely full. वहाँ जगह ही नहीं है हमारे delivery लोगों के पास जाके, in a reasonable time, pick the food up and fulfill that order. So we were looking at the dashboard and we're like, man, this is really bad. Our customer experience is suffering. We might just lose these customers, not just for food, but for other things that we have on the super app as well. And we're like, okay, let's problem solve how we can tackle this. And basic, simple idea, right? Man, labor in some of our markets is not super expensive. Let's make sure that there are some people from Careem standing in the line all day, right? So someone is almost at the top of the line when the captain shows up and can actually place the order on behalf of the captain and take the food away, right? So this is one basic one, which just happened last week. And it's because what ends up happening, at least in our business, is the underlying infrastructure is not reliable. Whether it is this example, whether it is the lack of digital payments, which creates a lot of inefficiencies, whether it is the availability of accurate maps, and then somehow or the other, we have to have a process where we start bridging these gaps in a way that is structured. But until those gaps get filled in a reliable way, we have to do hacks and cracks to offer the right experience. So that's a little bit on the operational technical side. You mentioned business practice as well. The one that comes to mind is we had this realization in the UAE very early on that the taxi service in UAE is actually quite good. And globally, if you look at the quality of taxis and you look at what the quality of taxis in Dubai, Abu Dhabi is, it's actually pretty good. So why will people use these nice cars when the taxi service is quite good? So very early on, we're like, man, we have to figure out a way to get these taxis on board. But the taxi industry here in Dubai is owned by 5 companies. There are 5 large families that own taxis. So we tried everything possible for 5 years. How do we get them on board? But they were like, you are our competitors. How can we partner with you? It didn't make sense to them that it would make sense for us to work together. Eventually, after one attempt, after second attempt, we said, why don't we do a joint venture? We'll do a joint venture between Careem and the regulator who was regulating us, that was regulating these taxi companies as well. And collectively, we would bring the taxi service to market. Will it cannibalize our existing business? Yes, it will, which it has. But that was a way for us to bring the taxis on board, which we believe is a bigger opportunity in a place like the UAE. So it took a lot of structuring to get this right and get taxis on board.
Excellent, excellent. Muneeb, any technical jugaad or when you were going through this phase of setting up the company and brought it to this level?
Yeah, I think there are many, but I'll give one example. So one new thing about crypto assets is that everything is new, and there has been a little bit of a Wild West type behavior as well, in terms of people overhyping some of these offerings and use cases and so on. And we were a team of kind of like computer scientists and people who were who want to abide by the law and the regulations and be very, very kind of like clean from that perspective. But in the US, there's no precedence. Like if you look at the regulators, like the SEC has never kind of like blessed any of these assets or offerings and so on. And so we started cracking a path for what it would take. And the decision is actually like very hard, right? Like because some people would be like, well, you should just leave the US or go and set up structures outside or maybe take more legal risk. And we were not comfortable with any of those scenarios, like because we thought that the US is actually the largest market. You can't block off this market or uproot your families and kind of like go start living on an island somewhere. But so we just took a crack at the hard problem, that let's try to go to the regulators and try to figure out what it would take. So I think there was a lot of, I wouldn't go into the details, but imagine that the securities regulations have been there since 1933. And our offering is the first time that the SEC qualified an offering that where you're not getting equity in a company, right? You're actually getting a crypto asset. And that was like big news for the industry, but you can imagine the kind of work that went behind it, the legal frameworks, the accounting frameworks. And the most interesting thing for me was actually what we had to do on the protocol level. Like usually as a computer scientist, you're designing protocols to optimize for whatever you want to optimize a protocol for. We were also optimizing for regulations. Like we would disable certain features because we knew that they would be problematic for the regulators, right? And most people who use these systems, they wouldn't even think about that, hey, this feature is designed in a certain way because it's actually easier for the regulator to understand what this is. And that's why they would actually approve this thing. So I think that example comes to my mind.
Great. We are talking about scaling up the businesses to multiple countries, and then Muneeb, in your case, scaling it up to a level where you can have your cryptocurrency listed on many of these exchanges and be able to disrupt maybe the next generation of the internet, bring changes to that as well. So in scaling these businesses, I see there would be different kind of scaling challenges. So Mudassir, I would like to inquire, think about the days when you had started and you were operating in one or two countries early on, and then you started building into other countries as well. So early on, I remember Careem was not available in Pakistan, and when you started the operations here, what kind of challenges that you faced when you went into a new country, new region? किस तरह की चीजें सामने आई?
Scaling is hard, and we're still struggling, because if you're growing, then every year you have to tackle new challenges. And the operational and technical challenges are relatively, they're not easy, but they're relatively simple to understand. So how do you create a system that can scale to millions of transactions on a daily basis versus only 5,000 transactions on a daily basis? Yes, it's not straightforward to crack it, but there are people that have cracked it. It's a technical problem. You should be able to do it, right? So that is one. Operational, same thing. How do you make sure that all the captains are behaving in a way that makes sense? You're not going to get it right on day one, but through a lot of iteration, learning, adapting, you'll get it to a point where it's good enough, right? And you can make it amazing as well and perfect as well, but everything is a cost, right? It's going to come at the cost of availability if you want the captain experience to be perfect. So wo cheezein to hai, and there are people that specialize in these things, and they can come in and they can help you solve these things. The thing that I found the most difficult in scaling is scaling the organization, scaling the culture, and that's I think harder, especially when you're growing rapidly, Zartash, because just imagine what happens, right? Let's say you have 100 people at the beginning of the year, and you're growing rapidly, and you hire, let's say, another 100 people next year. What happens is the other 100 people that you've hired, and these people don't just show up on one day and start working, right? There's a recruiting process that someone is investing time in. So जो पहले के जो 100 लोग थे वो तो other time recruiting ही कर रहे हैं. And then as soon as these people join, someone has to onboard them. But these other guys, the 100 guys that were there at the beginning of the year, they don't have any time, right? Because they're scaling the business, they're working day and night just to make sure that the business and the service stays alive. So they don't have any time to onboard these people that are joining. And then what happens is all of these people join. Someone has worked at Google, someone has worked at MasterCard, someone has worked at JazzCash, someone has worked somewhere else. They all bring their own ways of doing things. They all bring their own cultural values. And then very soon you create a mess. and there is no Careem way of doing things. There is like a messy way of doing things. And that's hard, especially when you're growing rapidly. So one of the things that we did, we should have done it much earlier, but one of the things that we did like in year 6 of Careem, we need to publish a Careem way of doing things. What is the Careem way of doing things? We have written some values already that was there from the beginning, but the values were pretty high level. We felt something more detail had to be given. And we wrote a culture book. We were like, okay, this is what the Careem way is. And then bit by bit, we're basically saying, what does that mean now for different processes, different systems, different cultural practices? And we're still in the process of doing it. And that to me is hard. It's invisible. And if you don't crack it, then you cannot, I believe, build a lasting institution, right? Like, because we don't want to build this thing for our life or for the next 10 years, right? Ideally, we build this thing for generations to come. And that is not something that at least people in the region have cracked. We've not built institutions that go beyond a single generation. So that's what my focus is, in addition to building products and systems that scale.
Okay. Muneeb, your take on scaling, starting from a startup, going into Y Combinator and coming to where you are today. What kind of challenges that you have seen and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, so I think our challenges, I would say, would be very unique because it's a non-traditional type of a company. Like, think of it this way, that early on, the company that raised most of the capital was doing R&D work and building public infrastructure. But once we launched the network, the core value of the network is that it's decentralized and open and not controlled by anyone. So our company actually can't even control the network. And we went through this process of like explicit decentralization, where we are actually giving up control, right? Like we are encouraging other nonprofits, other entities to join our ecosystem, and because we want to have a thriving ecosystem, not a single large company, which is counterintuitive. Like most people want to build kind of like a large business for that company. We actually want to grow the open source ecosystem more. And my company, so we built the public infrastructure. We actually ended up supporting a lot of other companies who are trying to work in our ecosystem, right? Like in some ways, you're helping others to come and compete, right? And that's counterintuitive. And and similarly, a lot of the early team, like I highly encourage them to go and start up their own ventures. So we invested in some of them. So it's a little bit like our team size actually went down a little bit. And some of the early folks went off and they're founders of their own small companies. And someone is running mining operations, someone is building a community-focused entity, someone is building mobile apps or desktop applications and so on. And that's great. So I think our ecosystem is growing, but that's a very different challenge, right? It's a little bit of a and how do you maintain? How do you explain this internally to your team members who are used to seeing like linear type of a growth, right? And how do you describe that one executive is actually leaving and launching a different company and we're investing in that, right? They're like, wait, who do I report to now, right? So those challenges are very, very different. But we had to like separate out our company from Stacks, the project. Think of this as if it's going to really become a open source protocol, like TCP/IP or HTML, like no one owns these technologies, right? Like they're just in the public domain. Everyone can use it. It's like Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin is not a company. There are so many companies like Coinbase and Blockstream and others that work in the Bitcoin ecosystem, but Bitcoin itself is not owned by any company. So I think Stacks is that asset. And then we have different companies there. Then for me, it's like challenging in a unique way as well, because then sometimes I have to wear two hats, right? Like I am the CEO of the company and have to do kind of like that work. But then in the ecosystem, people look at you as the founder And sometimes there are certain expectations of involvement in different ecosystem things that are not part of my job description, but to build a large, thriving kind of like open ecosystem, you need to engage with those things as well, right? So I think that becomes challenging at a personal level, that where my time and attention is going.
Okay. So last few minutes, I would like to wrap up, but we're talking about the global businesses and global innovations from people of Pakistani origin or Pakistani companies. It is almost obvious that we don't have enough companies in Pakistan which we can boast about. Why we need to figure out, okay, why there are not the size of Pakistan, fifth largest country in the world. Sometimes soon enough it might become the fourth largest, the way that we are growing. But why do we not see the kind of companies that you see from very small countries? Mudassir gave the example of Skype, came out of very small country, Estonia, and then went to Sweden. And so why do we not see these kind of companies coming out of Pakistan? There was somebody was mentioning the other day that if you look at the Pakistani stock exchange and you look at the companies there, it's a very traditional kind of kind of businesses sitting there, but innovative kind of businesses you don't see there. Why it is not happening and how we can address this. So why and how? I would like your thoughts on both why and how. So Mudassir, you want to go first?
Go first, man. Love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I think I would say that there are many regions in the world that have come up with their own playbooks for how to do this. But we will need some sort of a special version of that is tailored to the culture in Pakistan, right? Like something that comes to mind is, I do think that even though we might feel that in Pakistan there isn't, law and order might be a problem, right? But interestingly, I actually think that people tend to follow rules a little bit too much in Pakistan, right? Like I'm not talking about like a red light at a traffic signal or something like that. I'm talking about a traditional thinking, right? That here are the lanes. I'm either going to be kind of like an engineer or a doctor, or like a very much like they scope their lives of what potentially they can do very early on in their careers, right? Like this is what my family wanted me to do, or what I wanted to do, and they make that decisions when they're like 14, 15, 16 or something like that. And I think that mentality needs to change. That you are like in Pakistan, for example, you don't consider your undergrad to be a time of exploring ideas. Like that's not a concept, right? Like because by the time you go to your undergrad, you need to have everything figured out. Like you're either going through an engineering program and everything's decided, right? Which is counterintuitive, right? Like I think there needs to be some way of giving the younger generation space to figuring out like what their true passions are, and creating this space in society. And then I think support structures come in. Like for example, again, I know my mother is watching, and she would actually like, obviously she loves me, and she would do this in the kindest way, but she would always make fun of the things I was doing by asking me, how much are you getting paid for it? And the answer was always zero, right? That I'm doing this thing for free. I'm doing an internship somewhere. I'm like working for myself. And I think that's like in some ways is a very hard concept for people in Pakistan to understand, that you're investing in yourself, right? Like you are actually going for something bigger, and that might mean. So I think some structured programs, like for example, if people can get salaries while they're going through certain type of non-traditional education, or somehow these things are celebrated so that people feel a sense of pride. Like imagine creating like some sort of I'm just thinking from the top of my mind, that if you get selected in a top X, entrepreneurs class or something, and that's like a sense of pride there, almost as if the sense of pride people get when they get admission at a top university, right? Or some sort of a financial structure where you're actually getting paid in a healthy amount while you're working on non-traditional things, while you have a non-traditional job. I think there are some really deep cultural elements here that we might need to look into. And frankly, one last thought here is no matter what you do, in the end, I think it's going to be the successful entrepreneurs who set the right examples, but not just the examples. They start angel investing as well, right? So it really goes in cycles, right? Like there's one generation of angel investors that create the next generation of angel investors that creates the next generation of angel investors. I think in Pakistan, like that just hasn't happened yet. And hopefully maybe that can start changing, because that's not just an example, it's actually support, and putting your money behind somebody sends a signal of confidence that you can do this, right? And I believe in you. Here's a small check. Just go ahead and pursue what you want to do.
Great. So basically challenging the status quo and being able to recognize the importance of investing in yourself rather than looking at the short-term benefit. I think great thoughts, Mudassir.
Yeah, but I think things have not been great on this dimension for Pakistan, but I'm quite optimistic, and it feels near term that things will change, because a lot of things that were missing are starting to come in place, right? Ambition level is there now, funding has become available, talent has the right experience a little bit as well to make these things happen. But if you ask me what's held us back, यार पहला तो वही जो बात भी ना ambition level ही नहीं है. McKinsey wrote a paper on the Pakistan export industry, and they basically said there's a $200 million glass ceiling. Like every time a Pakistani exporter, forget about the innovative side of things, right? Well, the traditional businesses, maybe for a country of our size, our traditional businesses are not as big as they should be. वो 200 मिलियन तक पहुंचते हैं, कहते हैं यार अच्छा चलो बड़ा बिजनेस बना लिया है, इतना हमारे लिए काफी है. वो वर्ल्ड क्लास ग्लोबल एम्बिशन नहीं है ना. The Tatas and the Wipros and they had a very, very different ambition level than our traditional businesses had.
Mudassir, your video got stuck, I think. Is that only for me, or?
No, it's for me as well. So I think he might be having connection issues.
So let's see.
I think we can maybe wrap up as well, and let's see if he comes back.
I think we just hit the time limit. I was hoping that Mudassir would come back so that I can thank him for joining. I don't want to close the session without him being present.
Yeah. Let's give him 2 minutes. I think he'll just reconnect.
Yeah. Normally, we expect that this kind of connections issues would happen at sitting in Pakistan. Not this time though. LUMS has pretty good internet now.
It did even back in the day, right? Like that was a perk we had as undergrads.
Oh yeah. It's now 100x better than that. We have 10 gig links on campus network now, and really high bandwidth for everyone. So I'm not sure if Mudassir is coming back or not.
I think for the people watching, if they want to learn more about the Stacks project, you can go to stacks.co.
Yeah. So Muneeb, what next? Do you think? And I know that you will be confident that you might change the structure of the internet by using these new innovations in the blockchain technology. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I think what's happening is that these smart contracts around Bitcoin are potentially a very, very large market, and it's effectively, think of this way, that developers now have this superpower to program new types of things, where you can actually deploy capital into computer programs. and write computer programs. Like imagine replacing traditional financial products with smart contracts, and then building these types of decentralized networks and decentralized social networks, decentralized photo sharing, decentralized messaging, and so on, using the same technology as well. And that's the crux of it. Think of this as the frontier for internet innovation, right? Like this is where a lot of the next generation internet startups would actually be built, and some of these technologies are pretty fundamental for it. I think this is back. Welcome.
Yeah. So we were talking about the what's next, how it will impact the next generation of the internet. So I think we are already a little bit over time. So Mudassir, parting thoughts. Koi you were talking about what we need to do in Pakistan. So quickly, if you want to share those thoughts.
Yeah, sorry, got disconnected. The kids are home today, so something funny happened. But one thing, the last thing I was going to say is, Zartash, I think, which is something that you and the team at LUMS can really play a role in, is education, man. We don't have enough qualified talent. And if you want to build these large tech businesses, you need a lot of engineers, a lot of data scientists, a lot of product managers. हमारे पास बहुत कम लोग हैं, और जो हैं भी वो भी बाहर चले गए. So the people left over are nothing. And we started our technology development in Pakistan after the first 200 engineers. We could not hire more qualified people. We then had to set up a team in Dubai that was basically pulling people from everywhere. Then we had to set up a team in Berlin. तो यार 200 लोगों से ज़्यादा हम स्केल नहीं कर सक रहे, a tech team. Then it begs the question, right? What the hell are we doing? And हमारा पड़ोसी मुल्क produces like tens of thousands of qualified graduates every year. The scale is extremely different, and I feel that we really need to set up those IITs, those other tech institutions that are going to produce quality technology graduates in large numbers. And if you don't produce them, then I think it's going to be very difficult to build these large tech companies that you're referring to.
Mudassir, thank you very much for saying that. I think LUMS obviously produces great talent, but the numbers are extremely small. It's nothing compared to the size of the country. We only produce I think the maximum batch size that we had from the IT, computer science, engineering area is about 200 people. 200 people in a country of of size of Pakistan is really nothing. So definitely there is a need. I think the entire country produces about 25,000 IT graduates every year, and the quality is all over the place. And probably 2,000-3,000, 4,000 of these are really good. But that number is really very, very small, very, very small. I think it has to be at least 1 to 2 orders of magnitude more than that. So yeah, I think definitely that is a fundamental issue, fundamental problem that the country is facing. I don't see an immediate solution to that. There is probably a long-term kind of strategy in education that we need to apply, and lots of people must gather together usko aage le jaane ke liye. But yes, definitely there is if you have a million people, you will find few good people जो $1 billion businesses बना देंगे. If you have only few 4,000 people, why would you expect? The probability automatically goes low. So anyways, I think we are a little bit over time. Thank you very much. आप दोनों का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, and I feel honored to have worked with both of you. और अभी आपसे बात करके भी, and thank you very much for spending this time, and I would like to thank Zoom as well. Otherwise, if we wanted to talk with both of you, having both of you coming to LUMS would have been a little bit more difficult, but still we would like to thank you for spending your time. It's a little bit early for Muneeb, maybe not too early after the daylight savings time, so it would have been 1 hour back. But anyways, आप लोगों का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, and I would like to thank the LUMS team which has managed this seminar. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and I hope we will see many innovative businesses coming out of Pakistan in the next few years. We have already started seeing the traction happening. People have started raising money in Pakistan. Venture capitalists have gotten their interest in businesses coming out of Pakistan. So e-commerce probably will take part in taking the economy to the next level. Thank you very much. बहुत शुक्रिया आप लोगों का.
Inshallah.